Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a really ancient text, one that's, well, often misunderstood. Genesis chapter 3.
That's right. It's foundational stuff.
Yeah, and for many of us, I think this chapter is just the fall. A pretty straightforward story of disobedience, then punishment.
hmm Simple cause and effect.
But the sources we've been digging into, drawing really deep from the original Hebrew, they invite us to uncover something, well, far richer, more profound, actually.
It's definitely about more than just what was lost.
Exactly.
Yeah, this deep dive into Genesis 3, it isn't just a lament about, human failure. What's compelling in the original texts is how this narrative really works as a kind of sacred anthropology of becoming.
Okay, sacred anthropology of becoming. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it's a story of how desire awakens, how limits get tested, how shame is born, but, and this is crucial, how divine compassion, it actually remains present,
Mm.
right there in the middle of the judgment.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack this narrative, like verse by verse. And we're treating the Hebrew language not just as decoration.
Not at all. It's vital. Think of it as theological syntax, a blueprint for understanding.
Right. And we'll discover how this story kicks off not just humanity's fall, but what some scholars are calling the architecture of redemption.
That's a powerful phrase.
It is. So get ready for some, frankly, surprising insights that might just reshape how you view this whole foundational text.
Should be interesting.
Okay, so let's jump right into this pivotal chapter. Genesis 2, it ends with this picture of like perfect union innocence.
Complete harmony.
Yeah, but Genesis 3 instantly ruptures that. Our research calls it a theological reversal.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is that the text isn't presenting a simple myth of, moral failure.
Right.
It paints this picture of humanity's journey. Desire takes root, boundaries get challenged, shame makes its first appearance. But remarkably, divine love doesn't just vanish.
It doesn't disappear from the scene. And this is where we see kind of the birth of ethics, isn't it?
That's a great way to put it.
Because while the earlier chapters, Genesis 1 and 2, they emphasize what is given by God.
Generosity, provision.
Genesis 3 introduces what is chosen by humanity. The woman and the man, they become actual narrative agents. They're actively making decisions. Big ones.
With huge consequences. And the Hebrew vocabulary throughout this chapter is just incredibly precise, poetic even. It almost constructs the crisis word by word.
So we'll encounter things like the first question.
The first fear, the first excuse.
Mhm.
Oh, and the first curse, the first exile. All the firsts.
But also you're saying there are these surprising details hidden in there.
Absolutely. We'll also illuminate things like the first close,
Mm-hmm.
the first promise of hope, and that really persistent divine presence that, continues to walk with them, even in their shame.
Okay, let's turn to verse 1 then, because this is where things get really interesting right away. The serpent. It's introduced with this very specific Hebrew word, arum.
Yes, Arum. And the poetic irony in that word is just striking.
How so?
Well, in Genesis 2.25, just before this, the humans are described as Arumim, same root word,
Meaning?
meaning naked, vulnerable, and crucially, unashamed. Then, here in 3.1, the serpent is Arum, the same root, but it's inverted. It means clever, cunning, shrewd.
Wow. So it's a wordplay right at the start.
A deliberate one. This creature enters the scene not as like a brute predator, but almost as a kind of philosopher, engaging in intellectual discussion.
So it isn't just an animal. It's presented almost like a mirror of human cleverness. One source called it human intellect, disembodied mind without vulnerability, cleverness without communion. That's quite an image.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the text emphasizes that the serpent was already cunning high out. He was more than any beast of the field.
So it's an existing state.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And our sources point out that the danger this creature poses isn't because it, bites,
Right?
but because it understands. It can articulate things.
Mm-hmm.
And this very awareness is what kicks off the whole unraveling.
And that understanding leads straight to the serpent's first words, which are a question.
Yes, a question.
Afki. Indeed, has God said, you shall not eat from every tree of the garden.
Now, this isn't a direct lie, is it?
No, it's more subtle.
It's our sources call a deliberately crooked question. That Hebrew phrase, afki, it carries this tone of, like, disbelief, skepticism.
Creating space for doubt, not real dialogue.
Precisely. God never said they couldn't eat from every tree. In fact, Genesis 2.16 says the exact opposite. From every tree of the garden you may freely eat.
So the serpent twists God's generosity into restriction.
Subtly, yes. And the woman's response, you can immediately see the damage this subtlety does.
Yeah, she corrects the serpent's implication about every tree, but then...
But then she adds a prohibition God never actually gave, and you shall not touch it.
Where did that come from?
Good question. And she also softens God's very clear warning, Motamit, you will surely die, to pen, lest you die. It signals this fundamental uncertainty creeping in. This is a really critical insight our sources bring forward. This isn't just, open rebellion yet. It's the birth of religious distortion.
An amplification of the boundary.
Exactly, beyond what was actually spoken. The Hebrew scholarship we looked at highlights that this first theological conversation in Scripture is also its first theological failure.
And not because of a big defiant act.
No, but because of linguistic erosion. Command turns into hearsay, gift becomes restriction, and absolute certainty about death becomes maybe.
So the serpent didn't even need to tell a full lie at first.
Just needed to ask a question, a crooked one, and then, let theology rot from within.
Okay, so after that subtle distortion, the serpent escalates. It makes its first direct contradiction.
Yep, here it comes.
You shall not surely die. It perfectly mimics God's own powerful warning, Mart Tamlet, but just flips it, negates it completely.
And what's fascinating here, again, is that this isn't just a lie in our modern moral sense, like telling an untruth.
It's deeper than that.
It's described as a crisis of interpretive authority. The serpent immediately claims it has this intimate knowledge of God's mind, saying, Ki yireh Elohim, for God knows.
Right, so God becomes an object they're talking about.
Instead of a subject they're talking to. And this marks the very first time God is discussed in the third person by someone within the narrative itself. That's a huge shift.
And the implication is that God is deliberately withholding something essential. It says, in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil.
That's right. And the Hebrew for knowing here, yada, yada, it signifies this experiential, intimate understanding, not just like theoretical ethics.
Knowing good and evil from the inside.
Yes. Our sources describe it as selfhood with judgment. And here's the paradox. The serpent does tell a kind of truth. Their eyes will be opened, and they will be like Elohim in knowing good and evil.
What?
But it conveniently leaves out the crushing cost, the shame, the deep moral fracture that comes with it. The temptation, scholars note, is always towards premature knowledge.
Trying to define good and evil apart from God.
Exactly. Rather than within relationship with God. That's the core of the temptation.
So the stage is set. Doubt, distortion, the promise of godlike knowledge. Now let's watch how the story just accelerates into action. Verse 6.
Okay.
And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a craving to the eyes, and the tree was desirable to make one wise.
This single verse, it unfolds in three really clear waves of rising desire. First, perception, she saw. Then, evaluation, it was good, a craving, desirable. And finally, action.
And that phrase, saw that it was good, vater ekitov, that sounds familiar.
It should, because it echoes Genesis 1, where God saw that things were good.
So she's taking God's role here.
In a way, yes. She effectively usurps God's own prerogative. Humanity now declares for itself what is good. That's a massive shift in authority.
And this threefold desire is so, well, human, isn't it? Good for food. That's physical hunger. A craving to the eyes, ta'ava, implying maybe longing, even lust for beauty. And desirable to make one wise, bestial, for insight or understanding.
It feels incredibly raw, immediate. It definitely anticipates later categories of temptation you see in Scripture. But here, it's just presented as pure Hebrew desire.
And then the action comes fast.
Very fast. The verbs strike quickly. She took, vatikash. She ate. That word for took, vatikash. It carries echoes of other taking sins in the Hebrew Bible. It implies a moral encouragement, a transgression.
This is the moment.
This is the precise moment the woman becomes a moral agent in this story, acting on her evaluation. And then the man. He's just with her, Imma.
Silent. Passive.
Totally passive. He receives and he eats. And the sources really emphasize this. The sin is now shared, reciprocal, symmetrical, which just deepens the tragedy of their fractured unity.
And then, just as the serpent promised, literally the eyes of both of them were opened.
Vate pakachna, that verb pakash.
Yeah.
It's specifically used for the opening of eyes in the context of gaining new perception, often like a divine unveiling. So here it means they've entered a new plane of consciousness, but...
It leads to exposure, not enlightenment.
Exactly. And what do they know?
Yeah.
And they knew that they were naked.
Yeah.
Aramum.
Ah, there's that word again. Aramum. Creating that chilling phonetic irony with the serpent's arum. It's cunning.
Precisely. In trying to become wise, cherubim, they've become defenseless, cherubim. In seeking moral sight, they've received mortal shame.
And their very first creative act after this
Is to sow fig leaves. Vayet Peru. It's a unique verb in Genesis, and it implies this kind of shame-driven craftsmanship.
They're not clothes for comfort?
No, they're described as shagaro, like girdings or aprons, stark symbols of rupture. And what's profoundly important our sources highlight is that this shame, this inward fracture, this need to cover up, it happens before any punishment, before God even speaks.
Sin's first wound is internal.
It's self-consciousness, yeah.
Yeah.
The damage is done from within, immediately.
So instead of, divine wrath descending like a storm, God's arrival is surprisingly intimate.
It really is. And they heard the voice, cool grosses of YHWH, God walking in the garden in the wind spirit of the day, Nuakayom.
That word mithalek, walking, it implies something repetitive almost, like scrolling.
Yes, an intimate, habitual kind of walking. It's described by scholars as gentle, searching, even vulnerable on God's part. This isn't thunder and lightning.
No storm, no fire, just a cooling breeze, maybe the divine spirit moving.
And it's precisely in that stillness, that quiet presence, that shame finds it impossible to hide. The man and woman hid themselves of Ayachabe. It means to hide or withdraw from the face, panem, of YHWH God.
They flee presence, not punishment yet.
Exactly. The irony here is just so thick, isn't it?
Yeah, they reached out to be like God, and now they're running, hiding from his face.
And then comes God's very first question in all of Scripture. Where are you? And this isn't, God wondering about their GPS coordinates.
No, it's relational.
It's absolutely a question of relationship. God isn't accusing, he's inviting dialogue. It's described in the scholarship as a cry of loss and invitation. It actually reveals the origin of divine grief.
The creator searching for his creation.
Not to destroy them, but simply to restore contact. It's incredibly moving when you read it that way.
So, how does Adam respond? His first words after the sin, they're filled with trembling, right?
Absolutely.
Ah.
I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid, Vida, because I was naked, Eromanoki, and I hid myself, Bakave.
Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, I disobeyed.
No, he says, I was afraid. This is the very first articulation of human fear in the face of God.
Yeah.
And it's bodily, it's existential, psychological.
He's not afraid of hellfire at this point.
He's afraid of being seen, exposed. And God's next question is brilliant. Who told you that you were naked?
It's not rhetorical, is it?
Not at all. It cuts right to the heart of the rupture. Adam now interprets his own body as something shameful, something to hide, not something to share in relationship. That knowledge came from within, from the break.
And then comes the famous deflection. The blame game starts.
Oh, yes. The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me from the tree, and I ate. It's almost a masterpiece of blame shifting.
Almost impressive in its way.
It really is. There's only she gave, you gave, I ate. This is the absolute first act of blame shifting in human history.
And Adam's words, they create this triple fracture, don't they?
They do. It's a fracture against the woman, against God himself, and a complete avoidance of his own responsibility. The very syntax, the grammar he uses, distances himself from the act.
Our sources highlight that tragic shift from Genesis to bone of my bones to
the woman whom you gave to be with me. The gift itself becomes the scapegoat. This is literally hiding behind words.
So God then turns to the woman. What is this you have done? How do the sources characterize this question?
They describe it as direct, yes, but also poetic. A question of lament, really. Not God drawing up a legal case against her, more like, look what's happened.
And her response, it's starkly different from Adam's.
Very different. The serpent deceived me, Hishiani, and I ate.
What's key there?
She doesn't blame God. She doesn't blame the man. She identifies the source of the deception, the serpent, and importantly, she includes herself directly in the action.
And I ate. And that word for deceived, hisha.
It's rare. It implies being seduced, persuaded through distortion, not necessarily being forced against her will.
Okay. And what's really striking after this exchange is the serpent's complete silence.
Total silence. God speaks to the serpent next, lays out the consequences, but the serpent never speaks again in the entire narrative. It's just gone from the conversation.
Why is that significant?
Well, that silence is deeply theological. The deceiver, who was so eloquent, so cunning just moments before,
is now powerless, mute in the immediate presence of divine truth. And Eve's answer, while it's not a full confession maybe?
It's noted by scholars as being closer to honesty than Adam's response was. She admits her action, I ate, And she identifies the influence. The serpent deceived me. And this positions her, perhaps in a subtle way, closer to redemption.
Okay, so unlike with the humans, God asks the serpent nothing. The judgment is just immediate, unilateral.
Straight to the point. Because you have done this, cursed, Aru, are you above all cattle. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life.
Arur. Cursed. That's the first time God curses any being in Scripture, right?
It is. And Arur is a strong, final kind of word. The serpent is demoted, humiliated beneath all other creatures. Upon your belly, Gashon, implies utter degradation.
And dust you shall eat afar.
That's just profound theological irony. The serpent, the one who introduced death into the narrative.
I will now consume dust, the very residue of mortality, symbolizing shame, futility.
So that transition is complete then, from clever Aram to cursed, from tempter to silence.
It's a total poetic reversal of hierarchy. And yes, it's a divine monologue. It ends the conversation with a deceiver forever. And yet, God isn't finished.
Oh.
Because within the very next verse, verse 15, comes this glimmer of something completely different, something more.
Right. Before any punishment is given to the humans comes this really mysterious prophecy.
It's extraordinary placement.
And I will put enmity, a hostility, hatred between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. What on earth is happening here? Well, God isn't just predicting conflict. The Hebrew implies he is actively ordaining it, a deep generational war. And that word zera, seed, it's incredibly rich with layers in Hebrew.
So
It can be both singular and collective, so it hints at an entire lineage of opposition coming from the serpent's side, the serpent's seed. And also potentially a specific singular deliverer from the woman's side, her seed, which of course many traditions interpret as hinting towards a Messiah figure.
And that phrase, her seed, is grammatically a bit strange in Hebrew, isn't it? Usually seed is traced through the man.
It is unusual, and one fascinating interpretation from our sources is that this very ambiguity might be intentional, perhaps even hinting, subtly, towards something like a miraculous or divine conception down the line.
Wow. And the combat language. Shuff. Bruise, strike, crush.
It's potent. Think about it. A head wound is usually fatal, or at least totally transformational. But a heel wound, occurring while painful, isn't typically deadly. It's often inflicted as someone is moving forward, maybe stepping on something.
So it implies mutual wounding, but unequal power.
Exactly. Unequal outcome. And a battle that spans generations. And remember, this is the only prophecy given before any consequences are laid out for the humans. It just sits there in the narrative like a kind of whispered promise.
A promise of redemptive retaliation.
That's how one source puts it. And notice, the woman, who is just blamed by Adam, will now paradoxically be the one to bear the line of eventual deliverance. It's an incredible turn.
Okay, then God addresses the woman directly. Verse 16.
So,
I will greatly multiply. Harba arbe, that's a grammatical doubling for emphasis, right? Your sorrow and your conception. In sorrow you shall bring forth children.
that doubling, harba arba, really intensifies it. And notice the two key words here. It's avon, sorrow, pain, toil, and horeon, pregnancy, conception.
Yeah.
They're actually rhymed and paired in the Hebrew.
So her body, like the ground later, becomes this site of beauty mixed with agony.
That's a good way to see it. But what's really important is that there's no curse laid on the children themselves, only on the process of bringing them forth. She actually remains the bearer of that hope, that promise from verse 15. Her womb is still the gateway of the future.
Despite the pain. Okay, then comes that really famous and often misused line.
Ah, yes.
And your desire, Teshuka, shall be to your man, and he shall rule Yimshol over you. Let's unpack Teshuka, desire.
Okay, teshuka. It's a fascinating word because it only appears 3 times in the entire Hebrew Bible.
Only 3. Where else?
Here in Genesis 4.7, where it describes sin's desire, like a crouching predator wanting to control Cain. And then amazingly in the Song of Songs, where it describes beautiful, mutual desire between lovers.
So interpretations really vary. It could be sexual longing, or maybe relational dependence, or even a twisted desire for control.
Exactly. It's complex. But here's the crucial part regarding to the second half of the verse.
Right.
And he shall rule Yimshol over you. Our sources strongly emphasize that Yimshol, rule or dominate, is presented here as a prophecy, a description of the consequence of sin.
Not a divine command or approval.
Absolutely not. God is not legislating male dominance here. He is naming the relational disorder, the power imbalance that will now infect humanity as a direct result of their fracture. This is what some scholars call the birth of patriarchy.
Born from the fall, not from God's design.
Precisely. God is effectively grieving it even as he speaks it into reality as a consequence.
Okay. Now finally, to the man. Verse 17.
Yes.
Because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree, cursed, Aruda, is the ground, Hadame, because of you.
No, this is incredibly important. Notice who isn't cursed.
Adam himself. Adam is not cursed.
No. The ground, Hadama, from which Adam, man, was taken, is cursed because of him. Man remains the image bearer of God, but his environment, the very source of his substance, now becomes resistant. Hostile even.
It's the complete inverse of Genesis 2, where Adam and the ground were in harmony, meant to work together.
Exactly. Man's disobedience actively disorders creation itself. The soil turns against him.
So that relationship with the land is fundamentally strained, and Adam will eat in sorrow, itzavon, that's the same word.
It's the exact same word, itzavon, used for the woman's pain in childbearing.
Wow, that parallel is striking.
It really highlights this profound symmetry in the consequences. Both man and woman now labor under itzavon, sorrow, toil, painful effort. And nature now fights back. Thorns and thistles, dardar, will spring up, symbolizing disorder, obstruction.
Life will now be won by the sweat zat of your face, of literally nostril face.
Oh!
It's such a vivid Hebrew idiom for sheer exhaustion.
It really is. And this isn't punishment for work itself. Work was given before the fall. This is about the sorrow of survival, the struggle, and the ultimate consequence. Until you return to the ground, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return.
There it is, the death sentence.
The physical death sentence, yeah. A relational cycle back to the dust. Yet even here, notice, God allows pain, struggle, mortality, but not immediate annihilation, not starvation. The story of grace, even here, is clearly not over.
Okay, so after all these heavy curses and judgments, something truly unexpected happens next in the chapter. Adam does something. What is it that our sources find so significant?
It's in verse 20. In what feels like a really powerful, almost defiant, unexpected moment, the text states, "The man called his wife's name Eve, Chava, because she was the mother of all living, Kolchai."
Right after the announcement of pain and childbearing and death, he names her life.
It's astonishing, isn't it? Remember, naming in ancient Hebrew thought isn't just giving a label. It's a sacred act. It's declaring purpose, essence, destiny.
And despite the fall, Adam still has this divine function.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
He uses it here to honor her as the source of the future. The name Chava, Eve, comes directly from the Hebrew root chaya, which means to live or to give life.
So the serpent brought death.
But the woman, Chava, will bring life, despite everything.
So the very body that was just told it will bleed and suffer in childbirth
Is now named by her husband as the source, not the shame, mother of all living. And that likely includes not just biological life, but the continuation of humanity itself, maybe even its spiritual vibrancy. It's a profound reclaiming of hope.
So this verse, it's like a quiet rebellion against the finality of the curse.
That's exactly how some sources describe it. A whisper of redemption, a flicker of faith, a reclaiming of hope. Even facing exile and death, life will come through her. And significantly, God doesn't correct him. It's seen as a crucial turning toward the future.
Okay, then God's final act before their expulsion is equally remarkable, isn't it? Verse 21.
It really is. And why HWH God made for Adam and his wife garments of skins, ketnot or, and clothed them.
Now, this isn't their flimsy, self-made fig leaves. These are durable garments, ketnot or, made of skin, and crafted by God himself.
Yes, these ketnot are significant. The word often refers to tunics or coats, like Joseph's famous coat later, or even priestly robes. And crucially, as you said, they're made of animal skin, or...
Which immediately raises a provocative question our sources really grapple with.
Did something have to die?
Right. Was this the very first death in Scripture? To create garments of animal skin, it seems unavoidable that an animal's life was taken, implying a sacrificial cost to cover their newfound shame.
Many see this as deeply significant. It's not just about covering their physical nakedness. It strongly hints at divine substitution, a powerful foreshadowing of the sacrificial systems and atonement theology that runs throughout the rest of the Bible.
And the verb used, lavash, clothed.
It's often used in context implying an intimate act. Sometimes it's used of God dressing someone metaphorically in righteousness or salvation. So God doesn't just, toss them some clothes. He dresses them personally.
It's a gesture of healing, of protection.
Absolutely. This one subtle verse is said to reverberate through the entire biblical story. For some, it's potentially the first shadow of the cross. It's this incredible moment where God redeems their attempt to cover themselves rather than merely reversing or undoing it. For many scholars, this is a truly profound gospel verse.
Then God speaks again, and our sources describe this next utterance with words like loaded exclamation, signaling surprise, even divine mourning.
Yes, verse 22 begins with hen. Behold.
Behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. What's going on with, like, one of us?
That phrase, kerachad mimenu, is genuinely one of the most cryptic in Genesis. The grammar clearly suggests plurality,
Right.
inviting all sorts of speculation and mystery about God's nature, even here.
And this likeness to God they've achieved, it's flawed.
It's completely fragmented. They now bear knowledge, yes, but they lack the wisdom to wield it. They grasp something of eternity, perhaps, but not righteousness. They carry this godlike capacity for judgment, but it's wrapped in mortal shame. It's the inherent danger of that premature illumination.
And the immediate concern God expresses is,
And now, lest pen he reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever.
why is living forever suddenly a problem? Wasn't that the point of the tree of life?
Well, the Hebrew pen lest introduces this preventative intent. God isn't fearing like another rebellion here. He seems to be fearing their permanent fall,
Meaning,
meaning to live eternally in this state, in shame, in exile from intimacy, in moral fragmentation. That wouldn't be a blessing. It would be, as one source puts it, a hell of stasis, an unending broken existence.
so cutting off access to the tree of life, it's not vengeance.
Is presented as profound, albeit painful, mercy. It's done to preserve the very possibility of future redemption, future healing, to prevent them from being locked into their fallen state forever. And, importantly, our sources remind us, this tree reappears right at the end of the Bible. In Revelation, access is restored.
Suggesting hope, even in the exclusion.
Definitely, this story isn't over.
So the consequence follows. Therefore, the Lord God sent him out, Beshach Le'eshehu, from the Garden of Eden, to work the ground from which he was taken. This is the formal expulsion.
Yes, although the verb in verse 24, Vegaresh, drove him out, is even stronger. It implies banishment, expulsion. This is the final physical rupture, the formal removal from that sacred space, the place of immediate divine presence.
Yet it comes after God has clothed them, after he's prevented their eternal alienation.
Exactly. It's framed as the consequence of choice, not merely wrath. God is allowing the natural, agreed-upon consequence of their actions to play out, but, as we've seen, with an eye still towards future possibility, future care.
And he's sent back from the garden, Eden, that symbol of divine presence, and he's sent specifically to avad, work, or serve, the Adama, the ground.
Mirroring his original mandate back in Genesis 2.15, but now, crucially, the soil itself is cursed. It's a poetic and deeply tragic full circle.
This really introduces that great biblical theme of exile, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. But notice, God sends humanity back to the place of its making the Adama not just into a total void, an abyss. One scholar beautifully puts it, he's not exiled from love, only from the sacred garden.
So exile itself becomes a form of disciplinary love.
That's one way to see it, giving humanity a new, albeit harder, mission in a now broken world and beginning that long, long journey back towards restoration.
Which brings us to the final, very dramatic scene in verse 24.
The closing image.
So he drove out Vigaresh, the man, and he placed Vayashkin at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim and the flaming sword that turned every way to guard Shamar, the way to the tree of life.
That word used for placed, Vayashkin, is fascinating. It uses the root shaken.
From which we get
Shekinah, the term often used later for God's manifest dwelling glory. So God stations these fierce, radiant cherubim who are traditionally seen as guardians of God's holiness and glory right there, effectively in his presence. It sanctifies the gate, even as it blocks the way back in.
And the location east of Eden, Mikdabim, that's symbolic in the Bible too, isn't it?
Highly symbolic.
Yeah.
East is the direction of the sunrise, so potential hope. But it's also often the direction of exile, of longing for what's lost. They are now oriented away from Eden, looking back perhaps toward what they can no longer reach.
And that flaming sword that turned every way. Lahat hasha hamthapatet. Yeah.
It's not just a stationary guard. The Hebrew suggests a violent, constantly swirling, flashing blade of fire. It represents perhaps divine power, even chaos, but wielded with specific purpose. It ensures no one can force their way back into the sacred space.
But the crucial point, the reason it's there,
Is explicitly stated.
Yeah.
To guard Shamar, the way, Derek, to the tree of life. Shamar, the same verb used for Adam's original job to keep the garden.
So the tree still exists, the path isn't destroyed.
No, it's protected, guarded, awaiting redemption, as one source puts it. This closing scene, dramatic as it is, isn't the absolute end of the story. It's really the beginning of a long, painful, but ultimately hopeful journey of return. A story of covenants, sacrifice, and eventual promise access to that tree of life again, as you see beautifully described in Revelation 22.
Wow. So, okay, let's try to wrap this up. What does this all mean for us, this deep dive into Genesis 3, looking through the lens of the Hebrew? It's shown us it's far, far from just a simple tale of eat fruit, get punished.
Absolutely. It's an origin story, yes, of human becoming, of exile, the anatomy of how temptation works, the soul's painful distance from God. But woven all through, beneath the curses and the closures, there is what we call that clear architecture of grace.
God pursues.
He pursues, he questions, he clothes, he guards. His questions aren't just accusations, they're invitations back into dialogue. And his expulsion, harsh as it seems, is described by scholars as a kind of sorrowful preservation of the eternal, preventing something worse.
And the serpent's cunning, it mirrored something in human desire itself. The rupture of trust birthed that deep ache of shame we still feel. And even the curses themselves carried these surprising seeds of prophecy and ultimately protection for humanity.
And though that flaming sword now turns relentlessly at the gate, it guards not ultimately to destroy all hope, but to protect the tree of life itself, a tree that by the very end of the biblical story is offered again, freely. To read Genesis 3 through these eyes, well, it's like you can almost feel the dust under your feet,
Yeah.
and the breath still somehow in your chest.
Yeah.
It's hearing that voice still echoing in the garden calling, "Where are you?"
Hmm.
Not primarily to condemn, but maybe, just maybe, to begin the long journey home.
So this isn't just the beginning of sin. In a profound way, it's also the beginning of grace. What stands out to you listening to this deep dive? Maybe it's that idea that true knowledge, godlike knowledge, always comes with a profound cost.
Or maybe it's the realization that even in our deepest mistakes, our most profound failures, there seems to be always an invitation back, a call from the garden.
We really hope this deep dive has given you a richer, maybe more nuanced, and definitely more hopeful understanding of this absolutely foundational text.